Before anything else po, let's have a quick review regarding the past lessons that we had. First, we have one sample z-test. You will use one sample z-test if you want to check if the given sample is a representation of the population. And the number of samples should be greater than or equal to 30. Next is one sample t-test. We will use one sample t-test if we want to check if there is a difference between the given sample and the population. And the number of samples should be less than 30. Third statistical test is z-test for proportion. You have to use z-test for proportion if the given values are in proportion. Lesson 11 is person-R correlation. Person-R correlation is sometimes referred to as person-product moment correlation. We use person-R correlation if we want to check if there is a relationship between two given variables. So if that is the goal of the given problem, you have to know if there is a relationship between the two given variables, then the statistical test that you should use is person-R correlation. Using person-R correlation, we can also know how close or to what degree the variables are changing or moving together and the degree of association between the variables. So, parang we will know if there is a high correlation or there is a low correlation between the two given variables using person-R correlation. Using person-R correlations, we can also make predictions about future behavior. Now, for example, we know that these two given variables has a positive relationship between each other. So we know that if the first variable increases, the value of the first variable increases, the value of the second variable also increases. Or kaya naman, if we have a negative relationship between the two given variables, if the first variable increases, the second variable decreases, or vice versa. So that's what we call predictions about future, or parang that's how they referred to predictions about future behavior. But also, even if you want to know the relationship between the two given variables, you also have to check if the two given variables is an interval or ratio type of scale of measurement. Because if not, even though we get the, even though we're looking for the relationship and the given variable is not of interval or ratio scale of measurement, there is another statistical test for that. So, person R is for test of relationship, and also the variable should be in interval or ratio type of scale of measurement. This is just an additional information po na the numerical values and the problems for person-R correlation can be represented using a graph. So if you plot those values in the x and y axis, this will be the possible graphs that you can come up. So the graphical representation of any problem under person-R correlation is what we call scatter diagram, or sometimes we refer to it as scatter plot. As you can see po, on the upper left corner, we have the diagram or the graph for a perfect positive correlation and a perfect negative correlation. So, we start with perfect positive correlation. Why is it called perfect pala muna? It's called perfect because you can draw a straight line in the points in the diagram. So, if you can draw a straight line, meaning to say po, it's perfect. And then, why is it referred to as positive and negative? We have a positive correlation because, as you can see with the points, if the value of x increases, the value of y also increases. That's why they refer to it as a positive correlation. While on the negative correlation naman, as you can see po, as the value of x decreases, the value of y increases. So, that's why it's negative kasi it's the inverse. Parang inverse vice versa sila ng isa't isa. So, if the graph po of a given problem under person or correlation has a graph that looks like this one, we are really sure na there is a relationship between the two given variables. Kumbaga, you cannot separate those two variables nang hindi naaapektuhan yung isa. As in, sure kayo na may relationship sila sa isa't isa. Hindi nyo sila pwedeng paghiwalayin. So, sana all may relationship at hindi pwedeng paghiwalayin. Sarap. Next is the diagram or the graph on the upper right corner po. We have the low degree of positive correlation and the low degree of negative correlation. Ngayon, why is it low degree? It is low degree kasi po the points are scattered. They still have a correlation kasi the points are in one direction, pero since it is scattered, then you have a low degree of correlation. So if this is the case naman, if you plot the numerical values in a given word problem under person or correlation, the two variables is still related with each other, pero parang low degree lang, somehow they are related with each other. Parang somehow lang, not totally. Ganon. So parang kumbaga, sa isang relationship, pwede pang paghiwalayin. Kayang-kaya nyo pang paghiwalayin. Ganon. Next diagram is the diagram on the lower left side of this figure. We have the high degree of positive correlation and a high degree of negative correlation. So, we have a high degree kasi po, it is somehow scattered pero medyo close to each other yung points. If you will compare it dun sa low degree na medyo malalayo yung points sa isa't isa, the points are really scattered. Pero this one, parang tight yung points natin. That's why it is a high degree of positive correlation, but it's not perfect. And we still have a correlation kasi po, the points are in one direction. So, parang kumbaga, if this is the case, the points are related with each other. Parang closely related sila. It's just that you cannot draw a straight line from it or from the given points. That's why we refer to it as of high degree positive or negative correlation. Kumbaga sa relationship, ito yung mga nasasaktan pero lumalaban. Sana all pinaglalaban. Next is the diagram on the lower right. We have the diagram for the no correlation. So why is it, we refer to it as no correlation? Because as you can see po, the points has no direction at all. Parang it just form some shapes na 0 or O or and then U, or sometimes the points are really scattered and you cannot form any direction at all, or basta scattered lang yung points. So if this is the case, then we are really sure that the two given variable has no relationship with each other. Naghiwalay, hindi pwedeng ipagsama, ganun. Parang yung hindi ka crush ng crush mo, ganun, no correlation at all. Wag mo na kasi ipilit, masasaktan ka lang. Kindly take note of this table po because we will use this one in interpreting the degree of correlation or relationship between those two variables. The numerical values on the left side is the numerical values that you will get for the person or correlation, and its interpretation is on the right side po. And may I also add that if the given um, person R correlation is equivalent to 0, then it means that we have no correlation at all. And if the person R correlation is a perfect one, then we have a perfect correlation po. The table for person R correlation, this is where we will get the tabular value for the person R correlation. The link po for this table is already posted in our course site, so kindly check it po. Thank you. Next is the formula for person R correlation, and it's really long as you can see, but this is parang quite confusing na you really have to focus how are you going to simplify the given values. Pero, ayun nga, if you have to focus in simplifying this one, you can get the correct answer. And you can solve these easily using your calculator naman. So, it's fine. For person R correlation, we denote it as R. And then the formula is n multiplied by the summation of x times y minus the summation of x multiplied by the summation of y all over the square root of the product of n multiplied by the summation of x squared minus the summation of x squared and n multiplied by the summation of y squared minus the summation of y squared, where R stands for the person R. We denote person R as R, and X is the values of the first variable. And since we have the sign of the summation, meaning to say you have to get the sum of all the X values or the sum of all the values in the first variable. Next, y is the values of the second variable. So we have the summation of y and then summation of y squared. So ibig sabihin po ng summation is you have to get the sum of the second variable. And last is the n. For n naman, this is the number of paired values or datas in the given problem. Let's begin with problem number 1. Relationship between the daily temperature and sales in thousand of the company MMM, and values are on the table below. To identify if there is a significant relationship between the two given variables, we still have to follow the step-by-step procedure in answering this problem. Kindly disregard the solution written in your module and please follow this step-by-step solution. Thank you. First step is to identify the null and alternative hypotheses. Since this problem is under person R correlation, then the null hypothesis is R is equal to 0. The null hypothesis for all the problems under person R correlation will always be R equal to 0. R stands for the person R correlation, and 0 since we denote the null hypothesis as there's no significant relationship between the two given variables. That's why it is equal to 0. In sentence case, we can also write the null hypothesis as there is no significant relationship between the daily temperature and sales in thousand or sales of the company MMM. Next is the alternative hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis is R is not equal to 0. This will always be the alternative hypothesis unless the degree of relationship is already stated in the problem. Now, for example, is there a high relationship between the daily temperature and sales in thousand of the company MMM? If that is the case, then we have to use the greater than symbol. But if it is not stated, but if the degree of relationship is not stated in the word problem, then the alternative hypothesis will always be R is not equal to 0. And in sentence case, we have there is a significant relationship between the daily temperature and sales of the company MMM. You cannot state it as there is a high relationship between the daily temperature and sales of the company MMM, since we don't know if there is a relationship at all or there is a high ba or a low relationship between the two given variables. So all you can come up is that there is a significant relationship between the daily temperature and sales of the company MMM. And then for the sentence case, you can write it down, or if you don't want, then you may opt to not to write it down. For step 2, for problems under person R correlation, we have to identify the alpha level, the number of tailed tests, and the degrees of freedom. For the alpha level, as you can see, it is not stated in the given problem. So if the alpha level is not stated in the given problem, then automatically The alpha level for that given problem is 0.05. Again, I will repeat po, if the alpha level or level of significance is not stated in the problem, then automatically you have to write the alpha level as 0.05. Next is the number of tailed test. We have to go back to the alternative hypothesis and check the mathematical symbol that we used. And upon checking, we use the not equal symbol. So automatic, the number of tailed test is 2. For the degrees of freedom, the formula is n minus 2. So n symbolizes or represents the number of paired data given in the problem or in the table. So as you can recall po, we have 7 pairs of numerical data for this problem. So substituting, we will have 7 minus 2. And the values for the degrees of freedom is 5. Step 3, identify the statistical test that you're going to use for this given word problem. Step 4 is the computation. Let us first discuss what are you going to do if you want to solve this one manually. So we go back to the table that we have a while ago, and we will try to solve for the values that we need in the given formula. We disregard the first column since it's just a number of days and it is not important in our problem. So we just have to focus on the first variable, which is the temperature, and the second variable, which is yung sales in thousand. As you can see po, we have the column for x times y since we need the value for the summation of x times y in the given formula for the person R. Wherein parang you have to multiply each pair by each other and then you take all the, or you get the sum of those numbers, and that will be the summation of x times y. We also have a column for x squared since in the formula we have to get the value for the summation of x squared. And lastly, we have to also get the values for y squared since in the given formula we have to get the summation of y squared. Next is to solve for each given data in the given columns, and then after solving all the data for each column, all we have to do is take the sum of each column. Let us first compute for the values in the x times y column. So all we have to do is multiply each pair of numbers. Now, we multiply 36 times 123 and the answer is 4,428. Next is we multiply 32 and 112 and the answer is 3,584. Next is you multiply 34 times 120 and the answer is 4,080. And multiplying the numerical values in the x column by the numerical values in the y column, this will be the numbers, or this will be the product for the remaining numbers. Next is we get the values for the x squared. So all you have to do po is focus on the values on the x column or the values in the temperature, and then all you have to do is multiply it to itself. Now, for example, in the first row, we have 36 as the first x value. So 36 times 36, the answer is 1,296. Next, the second x value is 32. So 32 squared or 32 times 32 is 1,024. And then for the third value of x, we have 34. So 34 squared is 1,156. Squaring all the numerical values in the x column, we will have the values for the x squared as the remaining values of x squared as this. Next naman po is the y squared. So just like what we did with the x squared, we have to square the values in the y column naman, or the column for sales in thousands. So all you have to do is multiply the number to itself. So you focus on the values in the y column. So we have the first one as 123. So 123 squared or 123 times 123 is 15,129. And the next value for y is 112. 112 squared or 112 times 112 is 12,544. Next, the third value for the y column is 120. So we have 120 times 120 or 120 squared is 14,400. And squaring all the rest of the y values, we will have these values for the y squared. Next is to get all the sum for the all the columns that we have. Getting the sum of all the x values, we have the summation of x as 225. Adding up all the y values, we will have the summation of y as 799. Next is the summation of xy. All you have to do is add all the numbers in the column for x times y. We have the summation as 25,753. Next is we add all the numerical values in the x squared column, and the summation for x squared is 7,261. And lastly, we have to get the summation for y squared, and that is 91,383. Now that we're done with the manual computation, let me present to you the shortcut way of solving the values or the summations for the given values with the use of your calculator. Let me give you some reminders po before I present the shortcut method for this problem. For two-liner calculators po, the process of inputting your values in your calculator is the same po. The only difference is that instead of pressing SVAR, you have to press SSUM. And that SSUM is just beside SVAR. So all you have to do is look for it. It's either in the second function of the numerical key na 2 or 1. I can't remember na, pero ayun po. Instead of pressing S var, you have to press S sum so that you can get the summation of the values for X and Y. Next po is for two-liner calculators pa din, we cannot input the X values and Y values at the same time in your calculator po. So to get the summations of the values of X, you have to input the values of X first. And then for you to get naman the values of Y alone, you have to parang repeat the process na ibabalik mo siya in the yung original na mode niya, and then you have to go back to stats na mode, tas you input the values for y naman, and then you get the summation. Parang different steps. Ganon. You cannot input the x values and y values at the same time. Unlike for four-liner calculators na they can input the values for x and y at the same time, which yung ipapakita ko later. So, ayun. Ang magiging parang the only difference is you have to solve the summation of x, y manually. Kasi nga you cannot input the values for x and y at the same time. Ngayon po, for calculator or for students who use a two-liner calculator, if you cannot grasp what I mean or kung ano yung gusto kong ipahiwatig sa inyo, kindly send me a message po so that I can guide you on how are you going to use the shortcut way in getting the summation of the x and y value. So, PM is the key mga anak, especially those students who are also using the application in your calculator. If you cannot follow this one, kindly send me a message na lang po. You really have to know how to use the shortcut method kasi for the quarterly exam, I will require you to use the shortcut method and not the manual method.
Shortcut method for this lesson is somehow the same with the shortcut method we did for the previous lesson. So, to input the values, we have to press mode and then stats, and then instead of pressing 1 minus var, we have to press this linear equation. So, yung a plus bx or something na x plus y plus ya, something ganon. Basta yung may a plus bx. If ever you can follow this process, kindly send me the picture of your calculator and I will teach you how we're going to input the values for person R. So we have to press 2 and then, diba, last time, we just have one column. We just have X. But this time, we have X and Y column because we have two variables in our problem. So all you have to do is input the numbers just like what we did in the previous lesson for the shortcut method na you press the number and then equal sign. Let's input all the values in the X column first. We have 36, 32, and then 34, 30, 31, 32, and then 30. And then for the, you just move the cursor. Then for the Y column, we have 123, tapos 112, 120. Make sure you will follow the order of the numbers. 108, 111, 115, and then 110. And then you have to press, after inputting all the numbers, you have to press on. And then, diba, last time, we pressed shift tapos stat pala muna, and then last time we press VAR or VAR, but this time we have to press yung sum kasi we have to get the summation of x, the summation of y, the summation of x times y, the summation of x squared, and the summation of y squared. So we're talking about sum, so we have to press sum. So pressing sum, this will be the values that you can see. So let's say we have to get the summation of x first. So we have to press 2 and then equal sign. This will be the sum of the summation of x or the sum of the x values. And then to get the summation of y, you have to press on and then you repeat the process, shift, stat, tapos sum, and then you press the summation of y. Then 4 equal sign. This is the summation of y. Then, to get the summation of x times y, you repeat the process, shift, stat, tapos 3, and then summation of xy, ito yung number 5. So, 5, tapos equal sign. And then, you repeat the process to get the summation of x squared, stat, sum, summation of x squared, this one. Then, you press equal sign. This is the summation of x squared. And last one for the summation of y squared, 3, sum, tapos 3, tapos equal sign. So, that's it. That's it po for the shortcut method in getting the summation of all those variables. And then to go back to the parang complex or hindi man complex, somehow yung parang standard na mode of your calculator, you just have to press mode and then compute. Ibig sabihin ng comp. Then yun na, okay na po.
Now that we know the values for the summation, we can now substitute those values in the given formula for us to get the R computed. So again, here's the formula for the R computed. Then substituting the values, we will have 7 multiplied by 25,753 minus 225 times 799 all over the square root of the product of 7 times 7,261 minus 225 squared and 7 times 91,383 minus 799 squared. I discourage you po to directly solve this in your calculator because of the amount of numbers that we have, and I'm not really sure if your calculators can parang like you can input everything in your calculator. So I highly suggest you compute for the numerator first, and then you simplify the denominator, and then you divide the numerator by the denominator, and then that's the time you can compute for the R computed.
For the numerator, all we have to do is input the values the same way we write those values. So we have 7, open parentheses, 25,753, close parentheses, minus, open parentheses, 225, close parentheses, open parentheses, 799, close parentheses, and then equal sign. This is the value for your numerator. And then for the denominator naman po, you press on. So we press square root and then open parentheses, then 7, open parentheses, 7,261, close parentheses, minus, open parentheses, 225, tapos close parentheses, then squared, and then close parentheses. Next, open parentheses, 7 times 91,383, close parentheses, minus, open parentheses, 799, close, squared, close, then equal sign. This will be the value for your denominator. Kindly round this off to 2 decimal places. So we have 508.49. And then going back to the numerator, we have 496 all over 508.49, or you can also compute for this one by writing 496 divided by 508.49. It's just the same. Then you press equal sign. The value for our R computed is 0.98 because we have to round it off to 2 decimal places.
Step 5 is the decision rule. Decision rule for person R correlation is reject null hypotheses if the absolute value of the R computed is greater than or equal to the absolute value of your R tabular. Identifying the R tabular, just like what we did in the previous lessons, we have to go back to step 2 and recall the alpha level, the tail test, and the degrees of freedom. The way you read this table is the same how you read the table for t-test, wherein the parang first row is the level of significance if your tail test is 1, and then the second row is the level of significance if you have a two-tailed test, and then the first column is the column for the degrees of freedom. So for us to get the value for our tabular, we locate the degrees of freedom first, and then you have to draw an imaginary horizontal line passing through the degrees of freedom. So in this problem, we have 5 as the degrees of freedom. So you locate 5 in the column for the degrees of freedom, and draw an imaginary horizontal line passing through 5. Next is you locate the level of significance for two-tailed test, and that is the second row. Tapos po, you have to look for a level of significance 0.05 and draw an imaginary vertical line passing through 0.05. And the intersection of those two imaginary lines will be the value for your R tabular. Substituting the values for R computed and R tabular, our decision rule will be reject null if the absolute value of 0.98 is greater than or equal to the absolute value of 0.7545. Step 6, identify if we have to reject the null hypothesis or we fail to reject the null hypothesis. For us to know if we have to reject the null or we fail to reject the null hypothesis, we have to go back to the mathematical statement in the decision rule and check if it is true or false. So going back, we have the absolute value of 0.98 is greater than or equal to the absolute value of 0.7545. So extracting the absolute values, we will have 0.98 is greater than or equal to 0.7545, which is true. So, meaning to say po, we reject the null hypothesis. Next step and last step for this given problem is the conclusion. Since we reject the null hypothesis, the basis for the conclusion is the alternative hypothesis, and that is there is a significant relationship between the daily temperature and sales of the company MMM. Pero po, we're not yet done because we still have to identify up to what degree is the significant relationship of those two variables. So how are we going to do that? We have to go back to the tables, yung tables that we discussed earlier, yung isa pang table for person R. We have to refer to this table for us to get the degree of correlation for the given person R or R computed. Our value for R computed is 0.98. It will fall on the range 0.90 to 1, which means we have a very high positive or negative correlation. And since we have a positive value, we will stick with very high positive correlation. Instead of writing there is a significant relationship between the daily temperature and sales of the company MMM in our conclusion, we have to write it as there is a very high positive relationship between the daily temperature and sales of the company MMM. And that is our final conclusion. You'll ask me po if, ma'am, can we not just indicate the degree of relationship for the variables? In my subject po, and for this semester, you are not allowed to not indicate the degrees of relationship. You really have to include it for the conclusion. There are some books that they consider that there is a significant relationship and do not indicate the degrees of relationship. Pero for us, for this subject, you really have to indicate po. If you will not indicate it, then the conclusion is wrong. Okay po?